right, so the third part of our organelle discussion, kind of moving on to plant cells, some specialized parts of plant cells here. The first specialized part of plant cells is the cell wall, which last unit you had to memorize was made out of cellulose. So guess what? Here it is again for you, cellulose. Some more vocabulary for you with the cell wall is the plasmodesmata. Plasmodesmata is a pore. A pore is actually a hole in biology class. So there are holes in the cell walls called plasmodesmata. That's going to allow it's going to allow water and ions and other molecules to pass between two cell walls. So it's going to let those bigger things in and out. It's made out of two layers. It has something called a primary cell wall. And that's produced when the cell is still growing. And then it gets a secondary cell wall that's produced after it stops growing, kind of makes it harder and thicker and more structure. And it's located between the primary and the plasma membrane. So in here you can kind of see you have your primary cell wall, you have your secondary cell wall, you have your plasma membrane, and then the cytoplasm. Now, you might know that bacteria have a cell wall. Fungi also have a cell wall, but they're different kinds. It's not made out of cellulose. So this specifically, cellulose cell wall, is part of the plant. All right, so again, I'm just showing you that plasmodesmata, and it just allows things to transport around, so like the cytoplasm here. And you can see some things can be transported through the cell wall. This is a little bit higher level, nothing we really have to know. Chloroplast, so another very special organelle that's found only in plants. It's a type of plastid. A plastid is a double membrane, kind of looks like a flattened sphere. The chloroplast specifically is in charge of photosynthesis. So photosynthesis, we're taking the sun's energy, light energy, and we're making carbohydrates. Specifically, first we make glucose, and then we turn it into starch, right, or cellulose. So that's what it's doing. Chloroplasts have two internal compartments, two phospholipid bilayers. So this is another double membrane thing, like the mitochondria. It's got double membranes. Inside the first membrane is called the stroma, and the thylakoids and the grana. So inside this inner membrane is all the stuff that we're really going to talk about. So there are these things called thylakoids. A thylakoid is like one disc here. Inside the thylakoid is where the chlorophyll is. Chlorophyll is the green pigment that absorbs light. Okay. The stroma is where we find the chloroplast has its own DNA, its own ribosomes, its own enzymes. So it's very similar to the mitochondria in that it's a little cell inside of a cell. So the stroma is in here. It's like the cytoplasm of the chloroplast. So that's the special name for it. And then we have the grana. The grana are stacks of thylakoids. So notice over here, many stacks is grana. Granum is one stack. So, and it could be grana too. I don't know. Grana. But granum is just one stack. So that's why you're going to see kind of some of the things. Lumen is the name of the liquid inside the thylakoid, which we don't have listed, so you don't have to know. So a chromoplast is another kind of plastid that we find in plants, but it has the other colors. So we know that we see plants with very bright flowers with all kinds of colors. They have other pigments. Pigment is just a color. And so that, and often they're probably not involved in synthesis. There are a few exceptions, but in general, they're not doing photosynthesis. They're really just, the color is to attract. And then that leads also to a vacuole. Now, a vacuole itself is found in both plants and animals, but they're very different in plants and animals. In a plant cell has a large central vacuole, and that stores a large amount of water. Inside that central vacuole, it could have some enzymes, it could have some metabolic waste, it could have some toxins or some pigments, but in general, that's the water place. It also has little baby storage vesicles that could also contain toxins or plant pigments. And when you read in your book, it talks about how the tobacco plant has a small storage vacuoles that contain nicotine, which the whole purpose of that is actually so that insects won't eat the plant because nicotine is a poison. Animal cells have only small vacuoles, only little ones that go in our cells, and they will store food, they'll store water, they'll store waste, they'll store oil, they'll store fat. So we don't have a large one, we just have little ones. The plant has one large one and lots of little ones. So the structure is that it's just a membrane-bound sac, 3D like sphere. Animal cells, we have lots of small ones. Plants have large one and some small ones. The big thing here is something called turgor pressure. So when the large vacuole fills with water, that's actually what makes the plant kind of stand upright. And when it's low in water, that's when the cell gets smaller and then the plant looks wilted. And then the tonoplast is the name of the membrane around that large vacuole because it's got to be kind of extra strong. So this is what we're talking about with turgor pressure. When that vacuole is full of water, the plant stands upright. That's called turgor pressure. When the vacuole doesn't have a lot of water, the poor plant looks sad, right? It looks wilted. And so that's what gives it some of its structure. So this is the large central vacuole of a plant, and we often see all the organelles get smushed to the edge. And then the membrane that surrounds the large central vacuole is called a tonoplast. All right, so here's another picture of a plant cell, the large central vacuole here. Other structures that we could find. On the outside of cells, we could find cilia. Cilia are only found with animal cells. They're numerous and they're short and they're hair-like structures that are on the outside of our cell. They help, if it was a single cellular organism, they help the movement of the cell. Like in us, we have cilia because it actually helps move materials around the cell or away from the cell. So we have cilia that line like our throat and part of our lungs. And so if we breathe anything in that's like a particle that doesn't belong in our lungs, the cilia actually push it back out, and then you cough, and sometimes you cough up like mucus or something. That's getting all the bad stuff out. Your cilia are kind of helping get that out and causing the cough. How they're structured is something called a 9-2 pattern of microtubules. So you can see here, it's 9 all around and then 2 in the middle. So that's kind of the structure of cilia. And then we have flagella. Now you might see the word flagellum. That means you only have one. Flagella means there's more than one. And this one, like showing a bacteria, lots of flagella. Looks like cilia, but. So this is basically used for locomotion. That cell is in water. It's using that long whip-like tail to swim, quote unquote. It also is made out of a 9-2 pattern. It's just a longer set. Now, prokaryotes can have the flagella. Eukaryotes do. Um, we can think of like sperm cells in the human or in mammals or animals. They have a flagella. Um, so we find them in eukaryotes. Plants, some kinds of plants have sperm cells that have flagella on them too, but normally we're just talking about animal cells and prokaryotes. And that leads us to notes review 4.